Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This week we have another double portion, Behar-Bechukotai, which can be found at Leviticus 25 through 27. Our half-trip portion is Jeremiah 32, 6 through 27. And our Brit Chadashah portion is Matthew 16, 20 through 28. Now, there's a lot in this Torah portion concerning such matters as economics and consequences for disobedience to the Lord's commandments, and also some pieces about blessings for following the law, curses for breaking the law. But as I was reading through the Torah portion this week, the first verse that really jumped out at me was Leviticus 25:17. You shall not wrong one another, but you shall fear your God, for I am the Lord your God. Now, I know that this is said in the context of the way we handle land exchanges and that sort of thing, and property laws, but mental health has really been on my mind and on my heart recently. I think that this verse, although it probably means something closer to when it says do not wrong one another, means do not oppress, do not cheat each other, I think it serves as a reminder nonetheless that the Lord is constantly watching over our relationships and just how we treat other people. This should serve both as a deterrent for those seeking to do wrong and a comfort for those who have been wronged. When someone hurts us, especially when we didn't do anything wrong to prompt that hurt, it can be tempting to get rather cynical. It can be easy to embrace a no good deed goes unpunished sort of mentality. Now, I urge you to fight against this mentality because the Scripture tells us that our good deeds are rewarded. Proverbs 11:18 tells us the wicked earn deceptive wages, but a sower of righteousness reaps a true reward. Galatians 6:9 says, so let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we don't give up. And Matthew 5:11 through 12, our Messiah says, blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil things against you falsely on account of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now, there's a bit of a pitfall with regards to how we can interpret this particular passage. It's a pit that I've seen a lot of people fall into, and certainly I've fallen into it myself. While it is true that behaving righteously and doing good things will earn you the ire of those who love wickedness or hate God, we must not assume that just because we have made people angry that we are on the right track. I've fallen for this trick myself, as I said, assuming that because so many people were against me, that it was because I was the one being persecuted for righteousness' sake. It is true that sometimes we are persecuted for righteousness' sake, but sometimes the reason people react negatively to you and pull away from you is because you're kind of being a booger. I mean, that's the biblical term for it, yes? It's not. Don't take that seriously. It's not. It is important to speak truth, but not every truth always needs to be spoken. For instance, if a person has repented of past sins, it is not your place to go around telling everyone what those sins were. As Proverbs 11:13 says, a gossip reveals secrets, but one who is trustworthy conceals a matter. And if a person has made a poor choice in wardrobe to the point that we think they look ridiculous, we don't necessarily need to voice that. And I want to thank you all for never voicing that directed at me, because I'm sure at least once I've come in here wearing something ridiculous. Moreover, often we know when what we're saying or how we're saying it is rude, and there's no reason to be rude if we can help it. I would argue that when it comes to how we interact with people, we need to be both slow to take offense and slow to give it. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands on this, but if I were to ask how many people here have trauma that informs how they live, I'd be willing to bet that the majority, if not all of the people in this sanctuary, and even those watching online, would raise their hands. While I'm no clinician, I'd be willing to bet that the majority of the people in this congregation suffer from at least one of the following: PTSD or CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, neurodivergence, depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, fear of abandonment, social anxiety, low self-worth, and maybe at least one person who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder. We all have ways in which life has kicked us around and made things harder for us. We all have baggage to deal with, and it's not as simple as saying, stop doing that. Anyone who's ever suffered from depression can tell you how utterly stupid it is when someone says, just be happy. Anyone who's had problems with anxiety can tell you how unhelpful it is when someone tells you to calm down. We need to be gentle with each other because all of us are struggling with the wounds we've suffered from this world. This world and its systems are run by forces of evil that seek to tear us down. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says, "In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving, so that they might not see the light of the good news of the glory of Messiah, who is the image of God." 1 John 5:19 says, "We know that we are of God, and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one." And Luke 4:6 we read, "And the devil said to him, 'I'll give you all this authority along with its glory, because it has been handed over to me, and I can give it to anyone I wish.'" We are born behind enemy lines into a spiritual war in which we fight from the moment we enter the world. Thus, we all have scars, and some wounds of the soul have not yet properly healed. For this reason, we need to be careful in how we deal with each other. But we also need to be wary of whether those wounds cause us to be too quick to assume someone else intended to hurt us. When someone in this congregation says something that offends you, assess whether that is because they cared little for how you felt, or if it is because parts of your mind are still tender from your wounds. Try to give each other the benefit of the doubt, because even for as painful as it can be to assume good intentions and later be proven wrong, that is a far better place to start than cynicism and suspicion. And when someone is offended or hurt by something you say or do, do not assume that it is just because that they are too sensitive and they need to grow thicker skin. It may well be that your words poked and prodded at exposed nerves, a particular thing that they were sensitive about. I taught a similar message some years ago, and someone accused me of promoting snowflakeism, which apparently was his word for a way of thinking that causes one to be easily offended. The irony is that he was the only one in the congregation who expressed taking offense to my sermon. So, who's being easily offended? In my experience, the people who complain most about safe spaces are the ones who repeatedly fail to, or otherwise don't care to, make safe spaces for anyone. Do not assume that someone who is more sensitive than you or quicker to cry is weak, for it may well be that the battles they've fought would have broken you completely, yet they are still holding together, even if only by threads. When I was younger, there was this movie that came out called Fight Club. I hated it, in part because everyone talked about it all the time, which is in clear violation of the first rule of Fight Club, which is don't talk about Fight Club. But everyone was talking about it all the time. It drove me nuts. But I think that there's a powerful metaphor in the concept of that film. All of us are secretly getting into spiritual and psychological fights all the time that others don't see. We're all in Fight Club and we don't talk about it. Men are especially terrible at talking about the fights that their souls face. And why should they be good at it? So often when they do share their vulnerability, it is mocked or used to hurt them. When a romantic relationship or a marriage ends, men are utterly devastated because most men felt that their marriage partner was the only one with whom they could safely share their vulnerability, their feelings. And often those things that they confessed while opening up to their wives end up used against them in the same way during a divorce process. I worked in family law for many years. I saw this sort of thing all the time. We need to be better about sharing all our vulnerabilities with trusted people, and we also need to work on becoming the sort of people that others would come to with their problems. It isn't hard to be a good listener. You just have to decide that what the other person is saying is more important than what you might say at the moment. A few times in the past, people came up to me sharing details of their lives that I wasn't comfortable listening to. In all honesty, I wanted to leave those conversations to go do something else. But I was too socially awkward to admit that I wasn't comfortable, so I stayed there, not saying a word, and just hearing them out. Afterward, they told me I was a good listener. If only they knew how uncomfortable I was and how much I wanted to leave. Only then, though, did I realize that there was some value in not jumping right into problem-solving mode or finding an excuse to abandon the conversation. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that violence is the language of the unheard. I think we underestimate how many lives we might save just by hearing people, by listening to what they have to say, rather than being in a rush to tell them how it should be. It isn't hard to be a worthy confidant. Just remember not to share what was told to you in confidence to anyone unless emergency demands so. Our bruises, scars, and wounds from life's spiritual fights do not show, so it can be easy to assume that our fellows are unhurt. But I've been involved in leadership of this congregation for many years now, and from what I can tell, there are countless wounds that are hidden just under the surface. Sometimes the people who joke, smile, and laugh the most are hiding the deepest pains. We rarely see the full scope of the wounds in others. Sometimes we do not see our own wounds either, and even if we do, sometimes we do not take proper steps to clean them or to properly heal them. I want to make an important note here. If you are struggling with trauma, depression, anxiety, or mental illness, there is no shame in going to see a therapist. For that matter, I'd almost say that there's shame in refusing to see a therapist. Because when we struggle with mental and emotional issues, but we don't seek proper treatment, we place the burden of our struggles on the shoulders of the people who love us. Even if we try to shield them from our struggles by not telling them about what we're suffering through, our struggles still affect our relationships with them. If you find yourself looking at your life and find yourself repeatedly abandoned or cast out of your social circles, definitely consider getting yourself into therapy. It might well be that the psychological issues you choose to ignore are hurting the people around you. Or it might be that the people in your previous social circles were just being unkind, in which case it would be good to see a therapist and talk it out anyway. I know that it is common among Bible-believing people, especially ones of the more Christian persuasion, to say, you don't need to see a therapist, all you need is faith and prayer. But often prayer is just spending more time in silence, where the intrusive thoughts like to creep in. So telling a person who is struggling with mental illness that all they need is faith and prayer is like telling a hypoglycemic person that they just need to spend more time fasting, and they will be healed. At Genesis 2:18, Adonai said that it was not good for a man to be alone, and I don't think he just meant that Adam needed a wife. Given how often the Bible tells us to gather in community and come to the same place for holy convocations, it seems to me that fellowship with other human beings is of great spiritual importance. And we can all fill the needs for one another, but as a certain old song says, no one can fill those of your needs that you don't let show. When the world attacks us, we all respond in different ways, and often those ways are comparable to what we see in the adaptations of wild animals. Some of us, when the world repeatedly attacks us, become like hedgehogs or porcupines. We're sharp to the touch to ward off any who would come too near. While this can protect us from harm, it also prevents us from receiving the comfort that our fellows can give us because they cannot draw close to us without injury. Others of us, when we suffer such attacks, become like sparrows, eager to fly away at the slightest sign of danger. We can escape harm this way, but if we are too quick to flee, we may not realize that the person approaching wants to nurture and feed us, not harm us. Some of us develop shells like a turtle or a snail, and when we feel threatened, we pull into those shells because as long as we are in our shells, nothing can hurt us. But these shells also slow down our progress. They slow your walk. Some of us grow horns like a ram or a stag, and when anything resembling a predator appears, we immediately seek to attack and drive the predator away. But if you observe animals with horns in the wild, often the males of the species will fight amongst themselves as well, and even kill those who are never predators to begin with. And sadly, there are those of us who do not develop any defense mechanism at all, and just lie helpless and exposed. We need to keep all of this in mind as we interact with each other, both so that we are sensitive about each other's scars and so that we are aware of the undesirable behavior that we see in others may well be a defense mechanism against past pain. If we can do this, hopefully this will help us not wrong each other. Because that spiritual war I mentioned, it's not slowing down anytime soon. If we study Jewish eschatology, which is a word that means study of the end times, then we will see that this Torah portion speaks to the coming end times. Consider Leviticus 25:3-7, where it is written, "For 6 years you shall sow your field, and for 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather in its fruits. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap what grows of itself in your harvest, or gather the grapes of your undressed vine. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. The Sabbath of the land shall provide food for you, for yourself, and for your male and female slaves, and for your hired worker, and the sojourner who lives with you, and for your cattle, and for the wild animals that are in your land. All its yield shall be for food. The first thing we see in this is an increase in scale from the original idea of the Sabbath. In the first chapter of Genesis, it is said that Adonai created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested, thus instituting the Sabbath of rest. Likewise, we are to rest from our work every seventh day, and that seventh day belongs to Adonai. That concept is then brought up to a greater scale when we read this passage in our Torah portion, as we are meant to allow the land to rest every seventh year. When our people were in the wilderness, Adonai fed us with manna from heaven and instructed us to collect on the sixth day of the week a little extra, so that we would not worry about collecting more on the Shabbat, because the extra he gave us would be enough to carry us through that day. By the same token, Adonai promises that if our people will allow the land to rest every seventh year, he will give us enough food to stay fed through those times of rest. This sabbatical year, as it is already an expansion from the idea of the weekly Sabbath, is further symbolic of the 1,000-year reign of Messiah, which is to come. At Revelation 20, verse 6, it is written, "How fortunate and holy is the one who has a share in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no authority, but they shall be Kohanim," which is priests, "of God, and the Messiah, and they shall reign with him for 1,000 years. And as Psalm 94 says, "For 1,000 years in your sight are like a day just passing by, or like a watch in the night." If we look at these passages together, we get hints of a certain concept that we find in Talmudic tractate Sanhedrin 97a, which says, 6,000 years is the duration of the world, and it is in ruins for 1,000 years. On its face, this can seem like a bleak idea, a time when everything in the world is destroyed and desolate. However, we must consider that when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they were also in a place that was desolate, and yet during that time, the Lord's provision was abundant and obvious. A pillar of cloud gave us shade and guidance by day. A pillar of fire gave us warmth and light by night. Food came from heaven. Water came from a rock, or from bitter wells that had been turned sweet. Our clothes and shoes did not wear out. This is not unlike how it was in Eden. Prior to their fall, Adam and Eve ate the fruits of the orchard, that which grew on its own. Yes, the scripture says that Adam kept the garden, which implies some degree of work or effort on his part, but there was no toil. Not until Adam and Eve's expulsion from the garden, which is when agriculture became a painful affair. As it is written at Genesis 3, 17 through 19, "Cursed is the ground because of you. With pain you will eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles will sprout for you. You will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat food until you return to the ground." Thus, the sabbatical year spoken of in our Torah portion both looks back to the time of Eden and forward to the reign of Messiah, when the curse will be removed from the ground and all the world will be like the garden of the Lord. The land of Israel is instrumental in making this identification of the earth a reality, for that is the very place where it all starts. According to Isaiah 51:3, "For Adonai will comfort Zion, he will comfort all her waste places. He will make her wilderness like Eden, her desert like the garden of Adonai. Joy and gladness will be found in her, thanksgiving and a sound of melody." This prophecy must have seemed absurd to people living in any time after the destruction of the Second Temple, except for our modern times. In 1867, Mark Twain visited the land of Israel, which had not yet been restored as a nation, and he said it was a desolate country whose soil is rich enough but is given over wholly to weeds, a silent, mournful expanse, a desolation. We never saw a human being on the whole route. Lawrence Oliphant, a South African diplomat and traveler, visited Jerusalem in the late 1800s and reported that it was a desolate ruin, unpeopled and neglected. The idea that the restoration of Eden would start there in Israel and spread to the rest of the world must have seemed preposterous to so many minds over the years. Indeed, many Jewish and Christian scholars alike often interpreted this prophecy to be symbolic or spiritual rather than literal and physical. Yet we already see some tiny glimpses of this prophecy coming true even today. According to Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics, Israel grows 95% of its own vegetables, produces 95% of its own milk and dairy products, and 100% of its own poultry. Not bad for a desolate land. Biblical prophecy shows us this is only a taste for what is to come. For when the 6,000 years of toil and strife are over and the 1,000-year reign of Messiah comes, people from around the world will look to Israel and see its prosperity. For Ezekiel 36:35 tells us that the remnants of the nations will say, "This land that was a wasteland has become like the Garden of Eden. The waste, desolate, and ruined cities are fortified and inhabited." Zechariah 3:9-10 further tells us, "For behold, the stone I have laid before Joshua is the stone with 7 facets. On it I will engrave an inscription, declares Adonai Tsevaot, that I will remove the iniquity of this land in one day. In that day, declares Adonai Tsevaot, every man will invite his neighbor to sit under the vine and under the fig tree." There's a lot packed into this piece that needs a closer look. First, the Joshua that this passage refers to is not the same Joshua for whom the book of Joshua is named, who is also known as Joshua son of Nun. Rather, this is Joshua son of Jehozadak, who was the first high priest after the Babylonian captivity. He helped oversee the rebuilding of the altar and the construction of the second temple. However, like so many other prophecies and passages in Scripture, this prophecy has multiple meanings because Adonai's prophecies come true in cycles. The Hebrew rendering of the name Joshua is Yehoshua, and the name Yeshua is a shortening of that name. Thus, we can see how this prophecy speaks both of the high priest at that time and of the heavenly high priest, who is the Messiah. The 7 facets upon the stone set before Joshua can also be translated as 7 eyes. The stone itself is also a symbol of the Messiah. For Psalm 118:22 says, "The stone the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone." And at Isaiah 28:16 it is written, "Therefore, thus says Adonai Elohim, behold, I am laying in Sion a stone, a tested stone, a costly cornerstone, a firm foundation. Whoever trusts will not flee in haste." And the 7 facets or 7 eyes refer to Zechariah 4:10, where it is written, "The 7, which are the eyes of God that run back and forth throughout the whole earth, will rejoice when they see the plumb line in Zerubbabel's hand." Thus, the 7 facets or 7 eyes refer to Adonai's all-seeing presence. This also links to Revelation 5:6, where we read, "And in the midst of the throne and the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders, I saw a lamb standing as having been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth." But more to the point, I want to talk about the part where Adonai speaks of every man will invite his neighbor to sit under the vine and under the fig tree. This has some interesting implications. First of all, back in the Garden of Eden imagery, this speaks to the idea that those living under the Messiah's reign will eat of the produce of the land without having to toil. If we look into Talmud, we get some interesting insights about the symbolism of the fig tree. According to Tractate Eruvin 54a through b, just as this fig tree, whenever a person searches it for figs to eat, he finds figs in it, as the figs on a tree do not ripen all at once, so that one can always find a recently ripened fig, so too with matters of Torah. Whenever a person meditates upon them, he finds in them new meaning. Thus we see in this that to be under the fig tree is a common euphemism for studying the Torah. This casts a couple of passages in the gospel accounts in a new light. At John 1:48 through 50, we read, "Nathanael said to him, 'How do you know me?' Yeshua answered, 'Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you.' 'Rabbi,' Nathanael said, 'you are Ben Elohim, you are the King of Israel.' 'Because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree, you believe?' Yeshua replied to him, 'You will see greater things than that.'" When I read this passage in my youth, I always thought it was rather strange that Nathanael was so excited over someone saying he saw him sitting under a tree once before. Knowing, however, that under the fig tree is a euphemism for Torah study, this paints the scene in a different light, because Yeshua references Nathanael's Torah study here. This may be speculation, but I imagine Yeshua told him the exact passage he was reading or otherwise made some kind of reference to it. In any event, we see that in the 1,000-year reign, there will be study of Torah, and I imagine it will be a great study indeed, for we will have the whole of human history to reference, and the Messiah will be there to clarify anything that confuses us. However, regarding the fig tree, we also find a warning in the gospel account. At Matthew 21:18-19, we read, "Now early in the morning, as he," meaning Yeshua, "was returning to the city, he became hungry. Seeing a lone fig tree by the road, he came up to it and found nothing on it except leaves only. And he said to it, 'May no fruit ever come from you again.' And the fig tree shriveled up at once." To understand this passage, we need to first know that typically fig trees only start to grow leaves once they have already begun to bear fruit. This one, however, did not bear fruit even though it had displayed leaves. Thus, the fig tree was presenting itself as if it had fruit, but it had none, and for this it was cursed. In the same way, we need to be careful about how we present ourselves. If we have studied the Torah, and we can quote it day and night from memory, but our lives have not borne fruit, if it hasn't made a difference in our lives, we risk incurring a similar curse upon ourselves. For those who don't know, the olive tree was originally two separate congregations. One of those congregations was Sha'arei Tzion, meaning Gates of Zion, and the other was the fig tree, so named because we wanted it to be all about Torah study. Yet for those of us who were involved in the fig tree's founding, we understood that we were risking a curse, naming ourselves that, for if we grew leaves and all the trappings of Torah observance but did not actually bear fruit, we would be cursed for it. All of this symbolism is powerful, but I think we also need to look at this prophecy of every man sitting under his vine and his fig tree more literally as well in order to fully understand it. In this modern world, most of us don't really own much of anything. There are a few people, even in this congregation, who might own their homes and even their own land, but I'd be willing to venture a guess that most of us are renting. And in fact, if you have to pay property tax, I don't know how much it really counts as owning when all's said and done. Jennifer and I rent our home, and it would be a violation of our lease to attempt to grow a vine or a fig tree in our backyard. But in the 1,000-year reign, there is such an abundance in the land that every person living in the land can have his own vine and his own fig tree. Moreover, he has enough of an abundance to be able to invite others to sit under it with him. Micah 4:3-4 supports this. "He will judge between many peoples and decide for mighty nations far off. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning shears. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, nor will they learn war again. But each man will sit under his vine and under his fig tree, with no one causing terror, for the mouth of Adonai Tsevaot has spoken." The vine and fig tree expression implies possession of personal property and agricultural success. This is the biblical idea of the good life. It's not extravagant, with everyone living in their own mansions or with a wealth of material possessions. Rather, it ensures that everyone has enough to provide for oneself and one's family, and then also some guests, and we will live in contentment in those days. Moreover, we will have enough to share with others, with outsiders, and with the nations, and it will be required that we do so. As it is written at Leviticus 25:6-7, "The Sabbath of the land shall provide food for you, for yourself and for your male and female slaves, and for your hired worker and the sojourner who lives with you, and for your cattle and for the wild animals that are in your land. All its yield shall be for food." For those who may not know, a sojourner is a traveler or a visitor, an outsider. Thus, this passage encourages our people to share our abundance with the outsiders who come in seeking nourishment. During the sabbatical year, part of the reason we are commanded to let the land rest is to remind ourselves that all provision actually comes from Adonai. Yes, the rest of the time we are to work and toil to feed ourselves and our families, but ultimately we must know that our provision is in the Lord's hands. And just as he freely gives provision to us, so too, when we have abundance, must we freely give provision to others. In the sabbatical year, the produce that grows of the land naturally benefits everyone, just as in the 1,000-year reign, the produce of the land will benefit everyone who comes to eat of it. This abundance during a time when the world lies in ruins will be what draws in the peoples of the nations, peoples who might have otherwise wanted nothing to do with Adonai or with our people. As it is written at Isaiah 61, 4-6, they will rebuild the ancient ruins. They will restore former desolations. They will repair the ruined cities, the desolations of many generations. Strangers will stand and shepherd your flocks. Children of foreigners will be your plowmen and vine dressers, but you will be called the Kohanim, priests of Adonai. They will speak of you as the ministers of our God. You will eat the wealth of nations and boast in their abundance. Some of these outsiders, when they come to serve the Lord, will have an inheritance of their own in the land, for it is written at Ezekiel 47, 22-23. So you are to divide it by lot for an inheritance for you and for the outsiders who dwell among you, whoever bears children among you. They will be to you like the native born of Bnei Yisrael. They will be allotted an inheritance along with you among the tribes of Israel. In whatever tribe the outsider lives, there you will give him his inheritance. It is a declaration of Adonai. So for those of you thinking, but I'm not Jewish by ancestry, know that there is a place for you in the land too, in the kingdom. And for those of us who are of Jewish descent or who have lived a Jewish lifestyle long enough to suffer some of the anti-Semitic hatred that exists in this world, this may seem a little bit frightening. Those who've lived Torah-observant lives for more than a few years have likely encountered someone who hated us because we keep the law, or simply because we identify as Jewish, or because we support Israel. For such people, and especially for those born Jewish, it can be easy to see the outsiders as dangerous or even evil. Indeed, Rabbi Bill once told me that while in the Christian church it is common to do the church hop, as he said, where you try out a bunch of different churches, always looking to see if you can find something better than what you're currently attending. Inversely, Jewish people stick together with their synagogue families because generally we know that the people here in the congregation are the people that we can trust. With that in mind, we may find ourselves questioning how we can trust outsiders. This is an idea that I think Americans can relate to, and it's a complicated issue. Right now, it's a bit of a hot-button issue with people concerned about illegal immigration, knowing that mass illegal immigration is akin to invasion. The controversy surrounding this has caused one side to often become overzealous, lumping benign foreigners and even legal immigrants in with the dangerous illegal ones, while the other side fiercely defends even those illegal immigrants who have proven dangerous. But in the age to come, we will have no such worries, for Adonai will create peace. He will even make the wild beasts to be at peace with us. As Isaiah 11, 6-9 says, the wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the kid, the calf and the young lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow and the bear will graze, their young ones lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like an ox. A nursing child will play by a cobra's hole, and a weaned child will put his hand into a viper's den. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of Adonai as the waters cover the sea. For this to happen, Adonai will need to fundamentally change the nature of some of these animals. A bear's entire digestive system will need to change for it to graze as the cow does, and the same is true for the lion to eat straw like an ox. One thing we need to understand about snakes is that when snakes bite us, it is not because they are trying to eat us, with very rare exceptions. Rather, snakes are more afraid of us than we are of them. They strike out of fear, which is honestly half the reason human beings fight too, if we really think about it. But in the age to come, there is no more need to fear, and thus a child can play near a cobra's den, or a toddler can stick his hand into a viper's hole without any danger. This is how it shall be when the Garden of Eden is restored. Now, there is a certain piece of the gospel that I want to draw your attention to that will drive part of this point home. In the 20th chapter of the Gospel of John, we get the events that follow Yeshua's resurrection. Mary Magdalene goes to Yeshua's tomb but finds the stone rolled away and his body gone, and she begins to weep, thinking that someone has stolen his remains. At verse 15, we get a record of this interaction. Yeshua says to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Who are you looking for?" Thinking he's the gardener, she says to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will take him away." Have you ever wondered why she thought Yeshua was a gardener? Why she didn't recognize him when she saw him? Well, first, let's understand that if you are not expecting to see someone at a certain time and place, your mind might play tricks on you and prevent you from recognizing them. Jennifer often tells a story of how one of her brothers was living in Tennessee some years ago, and she went on a long road trip with some mutual friends of theirs to visit him. They found the house where he was living, knocked on the door, and asked for him. When he came to the door, he looked upon his own sister and some friends he'd known for years, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Can I help you?" He didn't recognize them because he wasn't expecting to see them there. In the same way, Mary was not expecting to see Yeshua standing there, which might account for why she did not recognize him at first. I wonder how often we overlook miracles because we're not expecting to see them. But why did she think he was a gardener specifically? Well, first, it seems that it would be logical to assume that's who would be there outside the tomb at that time of the morning. However, we can dig a little deeper. In those days, it was common for gardeners to clothe themselves in linen, because linen allows air to pass easily through it and prevents heat from being trapped against the skin. Where linen attire was also common for the priesthood, white linen was also common attire for the priesthood because it symbolized humility, and because Exodus 28:39-42 specifically commands that priests wear linen. Yeshua was clad in linen because he had assumed his role as the high priest in the heavenly temple, per Hebrews 4:14-16. Thus, what Mary assumed was the attire of a gardener was actually priestly attire in this instance. However, I would argue that Yeshua has also assumed his role as the gardener, the one who will restore the Garden of Eden. And we, as his followers, have been chosen to do the work to plant the seeds in this current age. The garden will grow in the age to come, but in this current age, we must do our best to help those seeds grow. We plant seeds by introducing people to the Word of God. We cultivate the soil through obedience to Torah, through kindness to others, through generosity to strangers, through every effort to align ourselves and our worlds with Adonai's will. I tell you, it is not enough to stop at eternal salvation. We are to cultivate the garden as Adam did in the first days. For now, we must do so with pain and toil, but the garden will be all the more beautiful on the other side. May our conduct be so loving and so good that outsiders who care nothing for our God will see what we have, and they will want to be part of it. May they come to know the Father because they wanted to be family with us. In that way, we will live up to our purpose as the Lord's imagers. Shabbat Shalom.